By way of introduction, everybody sees this photograph.
Yes.
Mhm.
Indeed.
We'll see it again a little bit later on. I just wanted to recap. So we've been through a number of different episodes now. The first time through, we looked at, we were looking kind of the lay of the land, the two hamlets that of the village. We talked about the three lineages that populate the village, along with a whole lot of other people who aren't members of those lineages. And we looked at some landmarks and heard some stories about dragons that live under trees and things of that sort. And then last week, we got more deeply into the whole issue of how people make a living in the village, and looked at a number of different agricultural pursuits, the primary ones being wet rice agriculture, tobacco cultivation, and sericulture, and then also cash crops and a few other things. So we paid a lot of attention to those, to that whole issue of how people make a living in the village, and looked at a lot of questions having to do with labor, which is a very important kind of issue. And so today I want to continue with a new set of a new topic area, and that is the area of ritual and belief. So we'll be looking at a number of different ceremonial occasions, and talk about what's happening there and how that underscores what people in the village think about this world and the rest of the world that is not so much present with us. So let's begin. Let me get the slideshow going here. And we'll start with this picture here. Can anybody tell me what's going on here?
Yes, after the organized trip we went on.
Anybody have an idea?
I don't know. There was a woman.
Face painting.
Well, that's a good guess. Not exactly. What we have happening here is the hum, exactly.
Just as Diane said when you weren't listening.
I was listening, Diane. I just didn't hear you. You have to speak up. So that's exactly what's happening here. This man here, who actually was the village chief for a while we were there, living there, is selling the hum to the bride's family. And in this area of the country, and in many others as well, they call it tubu jangsu. He's selling tubu. And so he comes to the household of the bride and he says, "Tubu saseu, buy my tubu, buy my tofu." And then he haggles with the bride's family. And what he's really selling is the ham, which is a box that contains several items that are relevant to the wedding that is about to take place. One is an official document which notifies the bride that she is that the groom, and it names who the groom is, would like to marry her, and it gives a date that this should take place, and then it includes some cloth, some red cloth and some blue cloth to make clothing for the occasion, and then also a number of other things that can include anything. It could be an electric mixer, for that matter, or any other thing that you might want to include that the groom's family wishes to present to the bride as a gift and as an inducement to marry into this wonderful family that she will live with her for the rest of her life. So this is the tubu jangsu. In this particular instance, usually what happens in the traditional Korean wedding, the tubu jangsu goes to the village of the bride or the house of the bride and her family, and sells the ham to them. In this particular instance, the marriage, and then the marriage takes place at the bride's house. And after the marriage has been, the ceremony has been completed, everybody packs up and moves to the home of the groom, where they will settle in. But in this particular instance, that is not happening. And in a number of the traditional weddings that I witnessed, it did not happen. It actually happened at the groom's house, although there were some that happened at the bride's house as well. And then the bride being a resident of the village, and then they would all pack up and go off to whatever place the groom had come from. So here we are. So the selling of the ham. And then what normally happens is, what traditionally happens is that the groom comes riding into the bride's village on a horse. As you see, this is not quite the same as a horse. They don't have a horse to ride on, so they're riding on the backs of the groom. This is happening at the home of the bride, which happens to be in Solgol. So the groom is coming into the village, riding on the backs of some of his friends, some of his buddies, and being followed by some other people from his household. And as you can see, he's wearing the very fancy traditional costume that a groom would be expected to wear, which is royal garb. For one time in every Korean person's life, both a woman, the bride, and a man, the groom, would have this very special outfit that they would wear, which is normally worn at the royal court. So here you see the groom coming into Solgol to marry his new bride in Solgol. And here's another groom who's riding in on the shoulders of one of my neighbors. The groom himself is one of my neighbors. They're entering the courtyard of the groom's house. This is the groom, in case you didn't guess. These wedding garments, by the way, are held in common. There's one set in Umji and one set in Yangji, and they have special organizations called Yeonbanggae, which hold on to these garments, and they're available for the use of anybody who needs them. So here we have, it's being used by, this is happening in Yangji. So now going forward, here we see the bride. And the bride is being led out of the room where she was being prepared. The ladies around her are ladies who came with her, and also some ladies of our village. Again, this is happening, the wedding is happening in Solgol. And she's, obviously she needs help because she has this long veil in front of her, she can't see. And so she's being led out onto the maru, and then off to the courtyard of the groom, where the wedding will take place. And here she is when she arrives at the groom's house. In this case, the groom's house, as I said before, traditionally it would take place at the bride's house. She bows before the wedding altar, and we'll take a closer look at that in a moment. And this is the wedding altar. And there are a number of items on this, fairly much prescribed by tradition. I wanted to call your attention to these two little figures here. I think this is made of duck. I'm not sure. Maybe Kwok or Okyo knows about this. But what it is a kind of a human-like figure. One in blue represents, this is the groom, and this is the bride with red and blue. And they have faces drawn on them. You can see the eyes here. And they're kind of weird looking. But we have some wine, and we have rice, and a number of other things. I want to give you a closer look at this, which I'm going to do right now. And here it is. This is on the wedding altar. And these are 2 sprigs of minari. Remember, this is one of the mountain herbs that people collect up in the hills and is very common. I actually like minari quite a bit. A very common side dish to have with a Korean meal. So here's 2 sprigs of minari representing long life, and a couple of 10-won coins representing prosperity. Although even in those days, you couldn't do much with 21, but anyway, so it goes. Unfortunately, I didn't take a picture. I had a number of weddings. Actually, I didn't look at the other wedding, where one of the things that happens then is that the bride and groom face each other and bow to one another. First, the groom, obviously the bride bows 3 times to the groom, and the groom to the bride. They offer each other a cup of wine. And oftentimes, when we did our census, I would say more than half of the married people in the village had never laid eyes on their husband or wife until the moment that the bride lifted that veil and her face was revealed to the groom. And since the veil was lifted, she could now see her husband and he could see his bride for the very first time. Here's another couple. This is a couple where this young lady is a bride from the village, and the wedding is actually taking place in Seoul, and they will soon be finishing the ceremony and then taking off to go back to his village. You can notice actually his wedding outfit and hers are much fancier than what we saw before, and much better condition too. Here's another shot of them with some gifts that have been presented. And now they've changed into Yankee clothes and looking as happy as can be. Actually, like I said, this was the first time that this fellow laid eyes on his new wife, and he was jumping up and down. He was so happy. She was so beautiful. And he thought, boy, did I ever luck out. And everybody in the village was saying, she's worth 10 of him. And so he really did luck out. Although there's a long, well, we won't go into the story, but so here's another picture of not the same family of newly married husband and wife and their family from the village. And has anybody familiar with this particular custom? This is something that happens in Chungbuk anyway. I don't know if it's common in other parts of Korea, but this is called pagaji sunda. You're wearing the pagaji. These are baskets, straw baskets. And when the wedding ceremony is over, the mother and father of the groom lift up these baskets and dance joyfully to celebrate the wedding of their son and the coming to their house of a new daughter-in-law and potentially a new grandson, right? And granddaughter as well. But grandson is what's really wanted, as you know. And here's another shot of the same thing happening inside. Actually, this is my neighbor on the occasion of his son's wedding. And here's the mother of the groom wearing the pagaji and dancing to celebrate their new daughter-in-law. Okay, and here is the bride's belongings, along with gifts and things being, all gathered together. There are suitcases and things too that will all be put into a cab if the wedding is happening in the bride's household, in the bride's village, and they will be carried off to her new life in the village of her new husband. This is a very actually poignant picture in a lot of ways, because this is her final departure from the place that she has known all her life, the home and the village in which she grew up, her koyang, and she's leaving her koyang for good and is going to a new koyang, which is not really her koyang because she's a stranger. Here's something that, I don't know, here's an expression that you may be familiar with. Have people seen this before? Chulgawein. Chulgawein. This means wein is like a foreigner, wegugin, wein. And chulga means to marry out, to go to your husband's house, to marry into your husband's house, and to leave the bride's house. So this is the definition of a daughter. A daughter is a chulgawein. What you're doing is you are raising a stranger. You're raising a stranger who is going to be part of her husband's house, her husband's family, and not your own. So she is a chulgawein. So very indicative for character expression of what the status of women is all about in traditional Korea. Okay, anybody have any comments? So that's the wedding ceremony. Of course, nowadays, this kind of ceremony has become rarer and rarer. They tend to happen in special function halls. And sometimes there's a mixture of traditional and modern elements to the wedding ceremony, but rarely do you see a strictly old-fashioned traditional ceremony of the kind that you just saw. Okay, now we're looking at a very different kind of ceremony. And this, of course, is a funeral. We are at the home of the bereaved family. This is the head mourner. This is the son of the man who has died. And these are members of his family. And they are prostrating themselves before the altar, which has been laid out to honor the person who has just died. Here's his picture here on the altar. And of course, lots of guests and visitors have come to pay their respects. We can get a better view of that here. Here's the coffin laid out, and it's already been placed on these two logs, which are going to bear where it will be borne to the gravesite. This is a very indicative pose with the chief mourner being bent over on a stick like this, and this is the mourning posture. And of course, he's wearing these hempen garments that you can see here, as are other members of the family. And this is a very traditional mourning pose. The ladies, as you can see, have straw rope around their heads, and they're keening. They're crying out, "Aigu, aigu," and just continually mourning the loss of this important person in their family. It's said that people who didn't have enough personnel to hold forth and make a good loud sound, they would actually hire women from other places to come in and help out with the keening, so that it would, because you want a really good effect. If you're going to have a good funeral, you have to have a good loud mourning effect. and this aigu, that kind of thing, on and on, is very important.
You're
Lots of,
hired, Charlie.
pardon me?
You're hired.
Okay, thank you. I knew I would come into my own sooner or later. And here we see the beginnings of the wedding procession. So that the coffin has been placed on the bier, which we will get a better look at in a moment. Here we have a flag which says, maybe Gual can help me, it says Hak Sang Namyang Hong, Namyang Hong. So this is Mr. Hong, who is the person who is being buried today. Namyang Hong Gong. Hak Sang is an official kind of Joseon dynasty title. It means it's a Yangban title. It's an honorific title, and it says Chi, and I can't make out. Is this Guan? Does this says Chi Guan? I can't. Can you read that, Carl? Well, anyway, I'm not sure what this last character is. I don't know if anybody can read it. I thought it might be Chi Guan, meaning the coffin. But whatever it is, this is a banner that is lifted and precedes the procession, and here we see a better view of it. And I imagine most people have seen this at one time or another during their time in Korea. It's a very typical sight throughout Korea, both city and country. When we were in the Peace Corps, you don't see it anymore. When we were last in Korea, Julie and I, back in 2010, 2011, toward the end of our stay there in the summer of 2011, Julie and I were invited by some friends to go with them to Ganghwa-do, Ganghwa Island, which is just off of, actually there's a bridge that takes you there from Seoul. And we went there to see, among other things, to see the dolmens. Ganghwa-do is famous for its rock formation that are man-made. They're these sort of like the Stonehenge, these rocks standing on, perched on top of one another. They date back to very ancient times, before the Three Kingdoms period, and nobody knows exactly what they are there for. But there's a good collection of them there in Ganghwa Island. And when we got there, we went up and looked at the dolmens, and there was a festival going on in the park. It was in a public park in the center of town. And there was a festival going on at the time. Lots of food and concessions and games being played and things for children and families. It was a fun outing. It was a beautiful day. And as we were coming back from down the hill from looking at the dolmens, I heard this chanting going on and looked over, and what did we see but a funeral procession, just like this. And boy, is this strange to see a funeral procession coming toward us in the middle of a public park. And it turned out that it was a sham funeral, and it was being performed because most people, say under 50, maybe 40 or 50, have never seen such a thing. This is the old days. This is the way they used to do it. This is ancient history. So this was a performance of a sham funeral, so that people would be able to see what it was like in the old days. Most people are not familiar with that nowadays. Most people will never have seen a scene like this living in Korea today. And once we get to the burial site, actually the coffin has been lowered into the grave. Some additional steps have taken place. And now the dirt is being tamped down onto the grave site. And these men here have long poles, and they're marching around and chanting as they tamp the ground. Okay, so now we're looking at something a little bit different. This is actually a scene of the erection of a new marker, grave marker, to commemorate one of the ancestors of the Kim lineage. And this is his grave, and a new stone has been set up right in this area here. And the members of the Kims from Umji and from far and wide who have left the village have come to this ceremony to celebrate the erection of this new grave marker. And what this signifies is, you know, the Kims have been able to accumulate some wealth. And one of the things that you want to do with your wealth is you want to honor your ancestors. You want to put up commemorative grave markers in marble, and that shows that the family is cohesive and that they thinking of their ancestors, and that they have the means to honor their ancestors, which is a sign of distinction and prestige. So this is a joyful occasion. And here they are. Here you can see the gravestone. And now they're bowing before the altar in front of the spirit of their ancestor, their great-great-grandfather, or whoever it is. I think it's, well, he's certainly the great-great-grandfather of some of them. And here's a different scene. This is something that most of you probably have seen at one time or another. This is a chesa. This is an ancestral rite that takes place every year to honor the ancestors and the members of the direct descendants of that particular grandfather or grandmother would come to the gravesite and present offerings and bow and give, you know, they're presenting food for the ancestor to eat and to wish him well or her well in the next world. This is very important that you carry out the graveside ceremonies, the chesa, every year. That's a sign of the continuity of the family. That's why you need to have sons, because the sons are the ones who can conduct these ceremonies and keep the line going and keep the unending line of succession and honoring the ancestors as you go along. So the ancestors, in a sense, never die. They're always remembered, and in this way, they're being written into the annals of future history. And then everybody sits and partakes of the sacrificial meal at the gravesite. These are the Songs, members of the Song family.
Charlie, what was the occasion? Was this a death day, a holiday?
Oh, this is a chesa.
Okay.
Everybody clear on what we mean by chesa? Okay, I'm showing this picture now because I want to tell a story that has to do with this man here. Let's see.
Charlie?
Oh, no,
Charlie.
that didn't work.
Charlie,
Yes.
just before you go, several slides back, the folks were bowing to the table that supposedly had a picture of the person who had passed and who was being buried that
Oh,
day.
that's all the way back.
Yeah, way back.
That's going back to the funeral itself.
I was,
Can we go back there?
but anyhow, how do they have that picture? Is it something?
You mean this?
Yes, that one.
Well, that was a photograph. It was probably I think it's a photograph. It's hard to say. It could be just a drawing. In the old days, there were itinerant artists who would come around and draw your picture. And that might be a drawing. I'm not sure. Or it could be a photograph.
And so they have to do that before you get too old and are about ready to die or something. Is that it?
Well, I guess by definition, they would, if they're going to get a picture from life. Um, Yeah. Well, this is a picture that was either drawn or taken while this man was living.
Thank you.
You are welcome. Okay, now we're back to this picture here, and I wanted to talk about an adventure that involves this man, Mr. Sung, who happens to be the oldest man in our village when we were there. He was in his early 80s. Um, and he told me this interesting story. He said, I ran into him on the village path one day, and he told me that had been out for a walk a couple days previous in the village, and he ran across a Buddhist monk. The Buddhist monk, he greeted him, and he asked the Buddhist monk what he was doing there. And the monk answered that he had come to visit Kunja-san. You remember we talked before about Kunja-san, this holy mountain where the great Wanhyo Tesa, the great Buddhist priest, monk of the Shilla dynasty, had come and built a hut and meditated for a couple of years in Kunja-san, which is in our village. So this monk had just finished going up to Kunja-san. He had come from some distance away to pay his respects to Wanhyo Tesa and to this holy place where Wanhyo Tesa had spent a couple of years in meditation as a hermit. Mr. Sung asked him, Mr. Sung has a son in his early 30s who was mentally ill. And this son spent a lot of time up in Kunja-san. He wore Buddhist, the clothes that you might expect a Buddhist monk to wear. Actually, you can see him. Here he is. Here he is right here. I suspect, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I suspect that his son was schizophrenic. But nonetheless, a very interesting man to know. He came to visit us very often. He would bring us gifts of meat that he had found, of deer and other wild animals that he had found up in Kunja-san. And he was very fond of sugar and usually did a good job of depleting our supply of sugar. Anyway, so we knew him very well, and he was a source of great concern to his father. He was not married. He was obviously very troubled, had big problems, and his father said, he was asking the monk, did you happen to see my son up in Kunja-san when you were there? And the father said, the monk answered, is he such and such a person? He dresses like a monk. He speaks in such and such a way. And the father said, yes, that's him. Did you see him? And the monk answered, no, I didn't see him. And but the monk knew all about him. And the monk went on to describe the son's problems. He said, your son has a lot of mental problems, doesn't he? He's crazy. Your son is crazy, isn't he? He speaks like a crazy man. He does crazy things. And the father said, yes, that's right. How do you know? And the monk said, well, I know these things. And then the monk said, would you like to know why your son is the way he is? And the father said, yes, tell me. And the monk said, it's because you have an ancestor who is buried in a grave that is facing in the wrong direction. And if you move your ancestor's grave and rebury him, so that his grave will be facing, properly situated along according to the rules of geomancy, then your son will get better. And with that, the father said, "Oh, is that so, Mr. Sung?" And they parted company. And what an amazing encounter. The monk knew about his son, when the first time they ever laid eyes on each other. It's a magical experience. And so the father took it very seriously and decided that he would follow the monk's suggestion. And so what he did is they set a date, and they arranged to go up to the grave. At first the father, when he heard the monk say these words, you have an ancestor whose grave is facing in such and such a direction, the father kind of scratched his head and said, "No, I don't have anyone like that. None of my ancestors have a grave like that." But then afterwards he thought about it, and he realized that, yes, he did. He did have maybe his great grandfather, his grave was facing in that direction. So he decided, okay, that's what I need to do. I'm going to move the grave of my great grandfather. And so he did. And here you see the bones of his great grandfather have been dug up and wrapped in cloth, as have been the bones of his great grandmother, who's buried nearby. And they're being repositioned, removed to another gravesite that's more in line with the cardinal directions and the geomantic principles that will allow for the descendants of this person to have a happy life, an untroubled life. Because this is a common idea that if the graves of the ancestors are not properly buried, the ancestors are not properly buried, then the ancestors become very troubled, and they visit their dissatisfaction and displeasure on their descendants. And of course, you don't want that to happen. And that's what was happening in the case of Mr. Sung's son, at least as far as he was told. Here's a closer view, and here's the geomancer, the chimjengi, the man with the compass, the chim, is the geomancer's compass. Do you see it?
Mhm.
And he's making sure that the grave is properly aligned in, so that the points of the compass, so that it is indeed facing in the right direction and has the right physical geographic features on either side and behind and in front, so that at last, and here's both bodies, by the way, the bones of both great grandparents, so that now at long last, they will be buried in a way that will, will provide for a good afterlife, an untroubled afterlife.
So what happened to the son?
Well, unfortunately, the son did not get better. And actually, we'll come to that in just a second.
No, I don't have to go searching all over Galway looking for graves.
No, unfortunately, it would have been great if this had done it for the son, but unfortunately it didn't. The son was just too ill. Actually, before I left to go back up to Seoul after we were done living in the village, the father asked me to please take his son to a neighboring town called Chungpyeong, where there was a Catholic mission run by American nuns, and they had a doctor, they had a medical medical facility there. And he asked me to take him to that facility to have his son evaluated, and hopefully they would give him something that the son, something that he could take, some sort of medicine to cure him. But so I took the son, I was doing the father a favor. I really didn't expect that this was going to have any beneficial effect, but we went together to Chungpyeong and we met with the Catholic nun who was, I think, in charge of the medical facility there. And, she told me that, there's nothing that she could do. But I had done my duty. Anyway, anybody know what this is?
Nope.
This is an effigy called, there are many different words for it used in different parts of Korea. In this part of Korea, it's called a hasuabi or subi. Subi is a word that was often used. And this is the result of a shamanic, a mudang rite, a mudang kut, in which there's the illness of somebody who's being treated by the mudang is driven into the evil spirit of the illness is being driven into the effigy, into the subi, and then the subi, after the kut is over, is tossed out into the, open air, and you can see them from time to time dotting the landscape. They're kind of hidden under trees and in the bushes. And
Charlie, I think chickens are often used in a similar way for a putakoti.
Not so much. I never saw that in our village. I don't doubt it.
I've seen it up in Seoul.
Yeah, there are many different traditions. Mudang traditions, many different kinds of mudang, and there are lots of differences from one region of the country to another. So you would expect to see some major differences. The clothes that they wear, the kinds of rites that they perform, the chants that they chant, all of those things are different. There's a lot of literature about that. This is a lot of study made of the different variations of Korean shamanism, and there's a lot of variations. Actually, when I was living in Seoul, I was on the campus of Seoul National University. One of the people who lived in the same apartment building as I did used to go over the hill to go to the campus. It's a shortcut to get to the campus from the apartment building. And he was walking over the hill one day, and what did he see? He saw one of these guys. And it turns out that hill, and this is on the campus of the university, was a common place where mudang would come and they would perform kut. And so, they would create these subi, and they would throw them out, after the kut was over, after the evil spirit had been driven into the doll. So here we see a mudang performing a kut, performing a rite on behalf of a sick person. In this particular instance, that sick person is the young man who, the son of this man who we had talked about just a few minutes ago. So she's performing, the father has hired this mudang, and this mudang actually lives in our village. And he has hired her to do a rite to try to cure her son, to drive away the evil spirits that are afflicting his son and cure him. The son was not cooperating, by the way. And here we have another mudang. And this one is not from our village. She's been hired to come to perform a different kind of a rite. And I would like to read to you from my field notes, because this is a very interesting event. It took place on April the 5th, 1974. And I titled it A Coot for Kim Hong-soo's Mother. So if you'll indulge me, this evening, a coot is being held for Kim Hong-soo's mother, who has been sick with tuberculosis for the past 2 years. Every winter, she loses her voice. She cannot speak above a whisper. But this year, unlike previous years, she has not recovered once the cold weather has begun to subside. A mudang is called in to perform the coot. Her name is Pak Kyung-shin. She's 48 years old, and she has performed a coot at this house once before and has done several coots for people in Umji about 10 times. She has never performed a coot in Yangji. The mudang begins about 10:30 at night. She faces the table of offerings and begins chanting. In her chant, she appeals to her tutelary deity, her Sunsang Nim, and she explains her age, where she is from, her name, and then her reason for coming here. She says that her hosts are stupid, unlearned, and therefore they do not know what they need to do to offer to the spirit. But she appeals to the spirit to understand and that they wish to honor it, and asks that the spirit help her to discover the cause of the disease. And then she lights up a cigarette and takes a break. And then after about 10 minutes, she begins again. She is seated facing the table and lights 2 incense sticks, waves them for about a minute under her nose, and then puts them in a censer. Her face begins to twitch. She opens her mouth in wide yawns. Then she begins moving her lips as if in conversation. While she is talking in this way, she occasionally shakes her head yes and no. After about 5 minutes, she puts on her hat, her kokkal, and then she begins, what is this word? She begins coughing. She begins to chant, but is often interrupted by coughing. After several attempts to start the chant, she stops. She says that that this cough is being caused by the failure to make proper obeisances beforehand to the Tujushin and Yongwang. The Tujushin is the guardian spirit of this particular household, this particular plot of land where the house is located. And the Yongwang is the dragon king, the dragon spirit. She goes out of the room and lights candles in the kanjoshil, in the tobacco curing shed, and at the pump. And then she washes and dries her face. She returns and she says that her stomach hurts. She lights a cigarette. After smoking it, she says that some member of the family must offer wine to the spirit. And Kim Hong-soo's elder brother says that he will do it. And he turns and faces the table. And then he offers the wine, bows deeply as the mudang begins her chant again. The mudang is chanting. She is asking, why is this woman sick? She introduces the woman and her problem. She says that her offerings are insufficient, but please help her. Why is this woman? Her name is Song. She's one of the Song family, although she's married to a Kim. She says, why is this woman Song Shi? Why is she sick? And her right hand, which is resting on her knee, begins to tremble. The spirit has now possessed her. Her body jerks and jolts at intervals as if from a shock. It is Yongwang, the dragon king, that is speaking through her. The people have not done what they should for the spirits, he says, speaking through her. They have not honored our laws. This cannot be allowed to go on. Her hand, still trembling, begins beating upon her chest. And then she raises it above her head and continues to tremble. Yongwang says, that is to her, that the cause of Kim Hong-soo's mother's trouble is that the spirit of Kim Hong-soo's elder cousin, who died in the Korean War, that this spirit died a bachelor. He has no place to go, no bride, nothing to eat. He is hungry. and he is harassing his aunt, Kim Hong-soo's mother, and this is the cause of her coughing and her sickness. From now on, you should do well by this spirit and by me, that is Yongwang, the Dragon King. Kasumi Apuda, my heart aches, the Dragon King is saying, because I am not being honored properly. I'm not being treated properly. At this point, she begins beating her breast. Her hand trembling is now back on her knee. Her chant is interrupted by occasional bursts of coughing. Her hand continues to tremble while she coughs, while her left hand, she wipes her face with a towel. After the coughing stops, she begins chanting again. And this goes on. She's waving her hands back and forth. And then she says, listen well, O spirit, where does she hurt? Believe me, she hurts in her head and chest. What did she do wrong? And then she says that she will do all that the spirit has instructed. She stops chanting. Food is now brought in and everybody has a snack. It's about 12:30 in the morning. The mudang, now let's go on. We're getting toward the end here. After eating, she takes out some cloth and makes 2 kakshi, 2 dolls. Whoops, I'm sorry. And you can see them here. Here are the kakshi. And underneath these kakshi, these are those subi. Remember the straw effigies that we saw lying on the ground? That's what's underneath these clothes. So she makes these 2, and she braids their hair, the hair of the one who's supposed to be the bride, and then dresses them in pieces of cloth, one for the bride and one for the groom. And she stands them in, I'm sorry, you know what? I'm talking about these guys here, not these. These are different. So these 2 here, these are the 2 kakshi that she made. And she stands them in a bowl full of beans. And she says, these kakshi are going to serve as the momjong, the servants, the personal servants or slaves of the couple, and this is the couple, which is about to be married. And she will marry off the dead, this is the dead cousin, and this is his bride-to-be. And she also makes dolls using 2 straw subi. Okay, there are 2 straw subi underneath here. One in a chimachogori, here we are, and one in a pajichogori, and that's what he's wearing. These are made of paper. The gowns are made of paper. And in a cloth envelope, she puts small quantities of beans, soybeans, black beans, milled rice, and this is all for the newly married couple to eat, and unwashed rice for them to plant when they settle down in the afterlife. And then she begins by appealing to her familiar spirit to alleviate the sorrows of Songshi, Kim Hong-soo's mother. And then she refers to all the good things that will be given to the spirit of the dead man if he will accept his new bride and stop troubling his aunt. Some paddy fields that will make him a rich man, and lots of sons and daughters. And he will be well treated, she says. Even if there is a serious drought, he will have a bumper crop. The threshing will go well. And then she makes a noise, warum, 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 imitating the sound of the thresher. In heaven, he will be able to be with Buddha. All of the above is to convince him to get married to the girl she has selected for him and go off to heaven and live with her. She uses panmal, the low-class language, to him, the spirit of the dead man, as she makes these offerings. If you go there, and she's using panmal, you will also have 2 servants, she says, and here are the 2 servants. If you don't pay attention to me, the spirit of my familiar, spirit, will make trouble for you. He will cut off your arms and legs and cut out your stomach. The spirit answers that he will do what she says. That is the spirit of the dead man. But first, he must eat. He is hungry. So a table with rice is brought in. The mudang spoons some rice out of each bowl, stirs it into a bowl of water, and gives them time to eat. And now it's around 2:30 in the morning. The offerings from the table are placed on the rice table. Money for traveling expenses is also put on the table, along with wine. And the mudang says, "Sul hanjan mogara," to the groom and to the bride. Have a cup of wine, each of you two. Her right hand begins to tremble again, signifying that she is possessed. She shouts, "I will give you nobi, I will give you servants, I will give you slaves." And here they are, the two nobi. She picks up the two kakshi, the two nobi, and out of the beans, and waves them in front of the dolls with trembling hands. She instructs them to the nobi, "Chal taragara, follow after them, go after them. These are your masters from now on." And then she gets up and picks up the dolls, the two Subi, and shakes them over Kim Hong-soo's mother. Here's a closer view, by the way, of the two, of all personnel here. Here are the two slave dolls, and here's the groom and the bride. And here's the sick lady. This is Kim Hong-soo's mother, and she's waving the two slave dolls over them. She gets up and shakes them over her. A white strip of cloth about 2 feet wide is spread on the floor over the doorsill and out across over the maru, over the porch. On the maru, on either side of the cloth, a candle is lit. The feast table is placed on the cloth, and the mudang has the dolls facing one another on either side of the table. She has them bow to one another. Let's go back and look at them again. Here they are. So now they're bowing across this table to one another, and they are now getting married. They're emulating the marriage ceremony that we saw a little while ago. And after the ceremony, she seats them at opposite ends of the table to partake of the feast. And here's the feast. Then she picks them up and has the groom embrace the bride to consummate the marriage. And then she has them bow to their chagun omani, that is to Kim Hong-soo's, to the aunt, Kim Hong-soo's mother, the one who arranged for them to be married. Now that the wedding is over, the clothes are taken off the dolls. They're wrapped up, as are the subi themselves. Everything here is all wrapped up. The envelopes full of beans, the duck, all of the sacrificial food, everything is wrapped up in a large green cloth, along with 2 pairs of straw shoes and 1 10-won coin. That's for traveling expenses, 10 won. So it's pretty cheap to travel in the afterworld, it seems. Everything having been wrapped up, she walks down the lane to the ditch in front of somebody else's house. People follow her, and then she bows in all directions. And when a fire is lit and she is sure everything has been burned, she throws everything into the fire, and then she returns. In the house, she says that she needs some branches from a peach tree, because peach branches are especially effective in chasing away spirits. Somebody goes out and gets some branches. She starts whispering, whimpering, then she begins to tremble again, starts shaking the peach branches at Kim Hong-soo's mother. Here she is again. And she hits the wall and the ceiling with the branch. She whips the branches around through the air, goes outside, strikes the walls of the kitchen with the branches, then the kimchi crocks in the front yard, and then the maru. Then she runs out of the gate and down the lane, throws the branches into the ditch where the fire had been set. She comes back to the house and asks for a knife from the kitchen, which she takes and comes into the room. She rubs the blade up and down Kim Hong-soo's arm. And then she runs out of the house, out of the room and out the gate. And with the point of the knife, she scratches an X in front of the gate on the road of the house to indicate that this ceremony has been performed and the coup is now over. It's 10 minutes to 4 in the morning. So this whole affair has taken about 6 hours. So that's a ghost wedding. not something everybody gets to see every day. Would people like to take a break? Because
Yes.
I've got I got some more. I'm going to just keep going and finish. I figure that within another hour or so, I should be able to finish up. But do people want to take a break? We can do that for 5 or 10 minutes. What is
Yes.
the general consensus here?
Yes.
Yeah, yes.
The answer is yes. Is that a yes?
Yes.
Okay, well, let's take a break and
Yes.
reconvene in 5 minutes. Okay?
By the way, Charlie, what happened to the money, the paper money on the table?
Yeah.
It was burned.
Oh, it
The
was.
paper money was burned?
Yeah,
Really?
How
I think
much was
so.
it?
But it was like 10-1, I mean, it wasn't anything to speak of. Okay, so now we've seen some, we've looked at the village, some rituals and some, beliefs that people have. And now I wanted to take a look at the village at play, Soul Goal at play. Let's take a look at some children first. Here we're having a game of jacks, sort of, that's done with little stones, really. But it's very similar to the jacks that people play here in the States, or if they still do, I don't know, they did when I was a kid. And do you remember these little hoops that kids, boys in particular,
I think
like to
so,
roll
yeah.
around? We used to see those all the time in Gongju. And here was a very popular pastime. When the paddy fields froze over, they would put together these little wooden sleds and go sledding on the ice.
Neat.
And here are some men of the village at play. They would have these little outings from time to time. These are some of the older men, and they're having a few drinks of makgeolli and enjoying what looks like a nice spring day. Makgeolli, I should say, alcohol was a problem for a number of people, men in particular, in the village. Some of them would become, or were horrible drunks, and they would reel around the village and, kind of be out of control. And alcoholism was a serious problem for a number of people in the village.
Jesus.
At one point in the spring of 1974, I believe it was, the young men of the village decided that they would invite their elders, the elder men of the village, to an all-day outing, and they would treat them. They would prepare all kinds of good things to eat, and they would sponsor this kind of holiday for the old men. And the old men got dressed in their finest clothes, and here they are having lunch. I was an honorary guest, so I joined them and took pictures. I became the village photographer, and so people asked me to come along often to take pictures, which I gladly did. And they also asked me to take pictures, family portraits and pictures of weddings and things of that sort. So I was only too happy to oblige. And of course, I would give them copies of the pictures. I'd have them developed, and then I would keep some copies for myself. Here are the men playing Huatu. This is that same outing. And here's that picture that we saw at the beginning, which I'm very fond of 3 men from the village, just kind of relaxing under a beautiful willow tree. Very, very idyllic scene of village life, dressed in traditional clothes. Beautiful. If I do say so myself. And some more having a good time. having a few glasses, and then some dancing and singing. This is Ketonyoma right here. Remember her? And here we are, having a lovely time, getting into that ferry boat that I told you about at the first session, and taking a ride on the river, having a few drinks on the way. And here's a bunch of us here. Here I am, the photographer, asked to join in the picture. And some of the ladies of the group. And here, as you see, is a co-educational outing, which is very nice. Here's a word I wanted to share with you that is commonly used in the village. Do you know this term, inshim? Anybody familiar with that term? Inshim. Inshim, here are the characters, the Chinese characters. It literally means human heart, human heart, human heartedness. And this is something to which everybody aspired. Good inshim, human heartedness, a situation in which people feel responsible for one another. They help each other. They're compassionate to one another. They're kind to one another. This is, if you say that a village, the village has good inshim, inshimi choon mao, inshimi choon tongne, itongne ga inshimi choayo. The feeling of human heartedness is good in this village. That means that people feel for one another. They share one another's joys and their pains, their sorrows. They live together in a good community. Inshimi choayo. And sometimes the inshim is not so good. And just like any other group of people, things happen. People are selfish. They do some nasty things to one another. But you have to kind of live with that because everybody's living together. I said before, this idea, we all live together. We have to live together. Kachisarai handa. And we need to try to keep up the inshim. There's this is kind of the corollary is this Chinese character. It's pronounced in, and this is one of the cardinal virtues in Confucianism. It's pronounced ren in Chinese, and this is pronounced. This is compassion. This is human-heartedness. Is one way of translating this term in Chinese, but in the Confucian classics, this term is referred to a lot. This is something that a human being should practice in. And inshim is the kind of Korean way of saying that. And here are the ladies of the village of Ryangji, I should say, all gathered, asked to have their picture taken in front of our house. I like this picture a lot. This is Julie back here. You can barely make her out. And here, and now I just want to kind of invite you to look at some faces of people in the village, some beautiful faces. Here are some children having a lovely time posing for the camera. And here they are posing in front of our house to have their picture taken. And here's a boy working in the fields. You can see he's carrying a chige. And I think this is his younger brother. Some portraits, if you will, village portraits. Two young men and a young lady and her younger sibling. Here's a couple of sisters. Remember I told you about these motorized tillers? There was one in each hamlet. This is one of those. This is the tiller. These are the daughters of Ketongiyama. Here are a couple of sisters, I think. And here are some more of our Ketongiyama's little girls, cute as can be. This man is our neighbor. This is our house, and this is his house. So it's right down the lane. This is Mr. Song. And Mr. Song is the Chongson. Chongson means the hereditary heir of the Song lineage. So he is a direct descendant of the man who settled the village, the first Song who settled the village. And you may recall in our first slide presentation, we saw a shrine that had been set up by the Song lineage to honor the apical ancestor, the man who first came, the first Song who came to the village toward the end of the 16th century. And Mr. Song is the direct descendant of that man. He is the Chongson, so he's the direct heir. And as the Chongson, he has a number of ritual functions, and he is respected, or is supposed to be respected, treated respectfully by the other people who, the other members of his lineage. And this man here is the Chongson of the Kim lineage. And here he is with his family in Umji. Direct descendant of the first Kim to settle in Sogol. And here are just some friendly faces.
Number.
Here's a lady with her great grandson. Very happy to be showing him off. And here's a young mother sitting on her maru with her child. A couple more wedding pictures. This is another wedding that I witnessed. This was in Umji. Actually, you can see that the wedding attire here is in better shape than what we saw in Yangji, taken better care of. Actually, the rats had eaten through some of the cloth of the clothing in Yangji. Too bad. You see, they have the right kinds of shoes here too. And here's a young couple with their baby. And this is a man of Umji who asked that he have a kind of formal picture taken with his wife. And here they are. Mr. Kim. And this is Mr. O and his wife. And here's a group of the Oren. Oren means, in strictly speaking, means adults. The term Oren, you may recall. And in the village, these are the village elders. Oren, or Oren Yangban, sometimes they're called. And here they are, kind of posing for their picture. Actually, not all of them would be included in that group. The ones who are lineage members, there are a few outliers here. These guys here, this fellow here, they are only sort of tendentially attached. They're the right age, but they don't come from the right background to be really full-fledged village elders. But they are treated somewhat, they're treated well. People include them in their, celebrations, and we try to practice good inchim in this village after all.
What is the difference in their background? What makes the difference?
Okay, just to give you an idea, this man here came to the village as a Muslim. Remember Muslim? He came to work as a hired hand many decades ago. This is Mr. Im, and Mr. Im is a very smart man and a very good businessman. And he worked for a few years as a Muslim for another family and settled down and started to saved his money and acquired some land, and then some more, and then some more, and until he had become, by village standards, a pretty wealthy man. And this is his brother, his younger brother. And this man too was a Muslim at one time. So these men are not originally from the village, and it's harder for non-native villagers to kind of break into the hierarchy. This man as well, this is the husband of Ketong. So these people, the people who qualify as village elders have not kind of degraded themselves by working as hired hands, as Muslim. Most properly, they would be members of the dominant lineages, as most of these men are, but you don't have to be. We did have some people who came into the village who were married to members of the lineage and came to the village and settled down and became, good solid citizens of the village and became Orun in their own right.
Charlie, what is the mountain in the background?
Sorry, I couldn't take this.
Is that the mountain you talked about?
Zoom.
I think that's Punjasan.
I'll call tomorrow, maybe.
And here, remember Mr. Song, the father of the troubled young man. Here he is on his maru, having some makali with some friends from the village. Here's one of the more distinguished. I love to take this man's picture. The grandfather of, actually the husband of the lady who you saw with her great grandson before. This is her husband. And here he is in a lovely pose with his traditional turumagi and pipe. He's smoking, and his kot, wearing his kot and wearing his paji chogori, wearing traditional Korean gown. You can see Umji in the background. You see the tobacco sheds? These are men who are visiting a funeral celebration. I really like the look of them, so I took a shot, took their picture. And do you know what's happening here?
Funeral, isn't it?
These are mourners, but these are four brothers. And as you see, they're all up in years themselves. They are observing the anniversary of their father's death. In traditional Korean custom, you mourn for 3 years. Actually, it's not a full 3 years, it's 27 months. You mourn for 27 months. You traditionally, what you're supposed to do is that you absent yourself from all labor, and you go and you live in your house, and you quietly live there. You wear mourning clothes, and you observe the mourning period. That is the mourning period that is prescribed by custom, and in the the old books that tell you how you should, what you need to do in order to be a good filial child. You need to mourn for 3 years, 27 months. And this is the 27th month. So they are finishing their mourning period. They didn't wear these clothes for 27 months as if it had been back, several hundred years ago. Well, most people even then did not do that, although some did if they could afford to do it. But they did put their mourning clothes on to observe the end of the official mourning period for their father. Here are some shots of the market town. This is Kwesan. Every 5 days they would have a market day, and people would come from all over and they would sell their wares. Here you see a man is selling eyeglasses. all kinds of sundry items. Here's some trousers, you know, anything that you could possibly need, you can find on market day. You see people wearing traditional clothes coming in from the neighboring villages. More scenes of the market. This is a scene of the cow market. It's part of the market. This man here, Mr. Sung, worked as a cow broker. If somebody wanted to sell their cow, they would hire Mr. Sung to help them sell their cow for them. And of course, he would get a fee for that. Here you see some traditional items, some cut, remember cut, and here's some pipes, some old-fashioned pipes.
Charlie, did things from the black market ever end up there? Because
I'm sure that they did. Yes, I'm sure. I don't remember seeing anything, but I'm sure there were items that were from the black market. Here are Julie and I sitting on our maru. And here we are with Kitongama. And here is Professor Kim. Looks just the same as he did 50 years ago. And when Professor Kim left us to go off to study at graduate school in England, we threw a big shindig for him, and he brought his wife. Here is Okpyo, Moon Okpyo, and here we are. Here, Julie and I, and we're asked the villagers to come in and see him off in a grand style. And this is our cat. I wanted to show a picture of our cat. We had a problem with rats and mice in our house. And so Julie went every week to Cheongju to study Kayagum with a former Kisang. And she was her Kayagum teacher. And this lady had cats, and the cat had a litter, and she gave one of those cats to us. And Julie brought her home on the bus, and we called him Malinowski. Does anybody know why we would call him Malinowski?
Because he looked like Bronislaw.
Yes, Bronislaw Malinowski was a very distinguished father of anthropology, a Polish man. And in the 19-teens and 1920s, he went to the Western Pacific to study the Trobriand Islanders. And he wrote a number of classic monographs about the Trobrianders. And he was famous for his fieldwork. Malinowski was sort of the father of anthropological fieldwork. Nobody did it as well as he did, and people followed in his footsteps. So we named our cat Malinowski so that I could tell people when we came home that I did field work with Malinowski, and I would be telling them the truth. And here he is. You can see the family resemblance.
Yes.
Bronislaw Malinowski.
Indeed. Did he purr or growl?
What?
Did he purr or growl? You couldn't
Well,
tell.
I never.
You couldn't tell because it was in Polish, right?
What?
You couldn't tell because it was in Polish.
Yeah, well, actually, he spoke pretty good English.
Oh.
Or so I'm told. He was a professor at the London School of Economics for many
He
years.
spoke good.
And now let's take a look at some scenes from the village as it was 10 years ago when we went back. You remember that bridge that was sort of falling apart? Here's what they replaced it with. Quite a different kind of a thing altogether. And here
They
we
didn't
are.
have to take it out every winter.
I don't think so. That you wouldn't want to have to put this take this apart and put it back together again every winter. And here we're looking down into the village, into the hamlet of Yangji Mao. You recognize this tree?
Is this the dragon tree?
Zelkova tree. This is the Nutina, this is the dragon tree. The dragon is still in residence at the base of this tree. So be careful. And here's Yangji in the background. And here's a better view of Yangji. And it looks quite different, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yes.
Quite different. Here's the rice fields, nicely, evenly laid out here in the front. And you see the houses. We don't see any thatched roof houses here, do we?
No.
As a matter of fact, so that many of the houses that we do see, like this one here and others that we'll take a look at in a minute, are brick structures that are, very Western looking. Notice this is a solar panel up here.
Holy wow.
Charlie,
There's a
how do
view
you
of
spell the
Yangji.
name of the dragon tree?
How do you spell it?
Yeah, I
Oh,
can't
it
hear
says
it.
the English name is Zelkova, Zelkova, Zelkova.
Okay, thank you.
This is Umji Hamlet. Here's a view of one of the houses.
Ah.
Not at all like any of the houses that we saw before. So this dates to 2010, 2011, and what we were looking at before was 1973, 1974. So what have we got? 1973 is that, so there's 37 years.
47 years.
47 years, sorry. Yes, 47 years. So so this is 47 years later. You can see these kinds of vehicles. You never saw those before. Here's the entrance to one of the houses.
Wow.
Pretty fabulous, huh?
Substantial.
Indoor bathrooms?
Indoor plumbing, yes, indeed.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. This is the house that we lived in when we lived in the village back in the 70s. It looks much the same, actually. There was some improvements. The roof is different. This outbuilding, which was a chogajit, which was a grass roof hut, basically, is now all done up in probably vinyl siding or whatever that is, and a metal roof. But the house itself is very much the same in its structure. A scene on one of the village roads. Look how wide it is.
And paved.
And in the village now, they're growing a number of new cash crops that they didn't grow before. Here's one of them. Does anybody know what this is? These vinyl awnings actually should give it away if you've had any experience seeing this thing being grown in other parts of the country. This is Insam.
Insam, yeah.
This is Insam. This is ginseng.
Oh.
So they're now growing Insam in our village. They weren't not able to grow it before. Insam was much further south in South Korea. And this is actually, as much as anything else, a product of climate change.
Right.
Because the climate has been warming as you go north in South Korea. And whereas before, Insam was grown pretty much well to the south of where we are here, now the climate has warmed enough so that we can produce a pretty good crop of Insam.
Okay. Pictures of Insam growing in Gangwon-do.
Yes, in Gangwon-do. They're growing in Salmon Kangwon-do.
강원도잖아. 강원도 of the Seoul. When
Oh,
we were
Gangwon-do,
there, when I
yes.
was there in the Peace Corps.
Yeah.
That's, that's the same.
This is for Ed Klein. Ed, what crop is this? I'll put you to the test here, Ed. Is he still with us?
Corn on the right?
This is really an unfair question because you can't tell because it's just coming up, and it's really impossible to really know what this is. But this is another brand new crop that is being grown actually in this village and all around Korea. You see it in the markets all the time. You see it in restaurants all the time and on the table all the time. It's broccoli, Western broccoli. A lot of broccoli grown in the village, and a lot of broccoli eaten every day in Korea, as you probably know. If you go to a Korean restaurant in the States, you'll often be served broccoli as one of the banchan.
On the right, is that corn or sorghum?
I don't think it's corn. It may be sorghum. I don't know. Here's another crop that was being grown by one family in particular in Umji, and they were really making quite a go of it. They were really trying to make a business out of it, and they were making a business out of it. These are cherry tomatoes. And here they are being boxed, and they've got a kind of an assembly line kind of affair. They've got boxes, and they've got a big hot house that they're growing the tomatoes in. It's quite an enterprise. It's mechanized. And this is the interior of one of the houses. This is Mr. Song's house. He very kindly invited us in and had us spend the night. And this is his living room. Not a typical Korean room that you would see in 1970s or 1960s when we were in the Peace Corps. Not a bit of it. And there's their kitchen. Not like your typical old-fashioned Korean kitchen with a kitchen table that you can see here. And here's their flat screen TV. And Mr. Song and his wife really liked plants, and they had plants all over the place.
Hey, Charlie, did they have a special refrigerator for kimchi? Because I visited a friend.
I don't know if they have. They have a refrigerator.
But
They have a refrigerator that's over here somewhere. I don't know if they have a special one for kimchi.
Yeah, my friend had one that was just for kimchi.
Yeah, they're very popular.
Yeah.
Those are very popular. I don't know if they had one here. And here are our hosts. This is Mr. Song and his wife, the proud owners of this lovely house. And here we are having a meal with Mr. Song. Here's Kim Kwang-ok and yours truly and Julie with Mr. Song. And even though we would be invited, when we came back to the village again, we were invited into a number of houses and given some sul and given some panchan or a whole meal. And invariably we were seated on the floor. Here we have all of these, nobody would ever sit on the sofa, or there were easy chairs or all kinds of overstuffed chairs. Nobody ever used them. Everybody sat on the floor.
It's warmer.
What's that?
It's warmer on the floor.
Well, I don't think it's warmer. I don't think it's not ondo, I don't think.
Anyway, it must have been summertime. You're wearing short sleeves.
Yeah, right, yeah.
Yeah, that's true. It's
More
weather
and
was
more,
warm enough for us to.
more and more people in Seoul are sitting on the sofas and the chairs, and less.
Right, in apartments,
Yes.
living in apartments. But in the village, they don't live in, although there are a number of rural areas now that have high-rise apartments surrounding the fields. It's really strange. You go to these places and the fields are all together, and then behind them and all together, it's like this a sea of buildings that are apartment buildings, and that's where the villagers live. But in Sogo, they did not have apartment buildings. I wanted to show this picture. This is a wedding, a recent wedding that happened in 2010, I think it was. Actually, it might have the year here. I don't see it. It was 2009. Anyway, this is happening at the Kwesan Nong Hyup Nong Hyup
Yeshikjang.
Yeshikjang. This is the function hall for the cooperative, and here is Mr. Kim from Umji, who's being married, and his bride. It says here's his name, Kim Hyung Soo Kun, who's the groom. It says Shilang, and it says Shinbu, and here's her name. And you're not going to be able to read it too well. Let's see if I can. Oops.
Dun He.
Di Ran Hyun or something. This is a Vietnamese name. This young lady is from Vietnam. And more nowadays, people, young men, and this Mr. Kim is not so young. He's probably a good 40 now, and yet he's still a bachelor. And it's very hard to find women who are willing to marry people from the countryside nowadays. And there are a number of reasons for that. But women have can be very choosy about who they're going to marry, and they tend to want to marry somebody who is well educated and has a good job and can support her in a good middle class lifestyle, and not too many working class young men or even older men or people who live in the countryside. It's not particularly desirable to want to live in the countryside. The great majority of Koreans now live in the cities. And so we have a situation where the men have to resort to buying basically foreign brides. And Vietnam is a very common place to do that. They hire a broker, a Korean man, who goes to Vietnam and finds a family that's willing to part with one of their daughters for money, of course. And the arrangement is made, and we have the deal is struck, and the woman comes not knowing a word of Korean to live with her new husband, and here they are being married. And these, of course, can be very difficult situations for the young woman. I mean, she's trying to accustom herself to a whole new culture, a whole new family situation. Very often, these young women are not treated well, and it can be very sad. Sometimes it works out well, and that's great. But of course, the women are tending to come from difficult circumstances themselves. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. There are lots of problems. And when we were living in Korea, there were stories in the papers of young wives who come from Vietnam or the Philippines or China being badly mistreated. I want to just go back for a second, real quickly. Let's take a look at this view of Umji, for example, and just say something about another way in which the village has changed in a very remarkable way. And that is, when we were living in there in 1973, 74, the population of Yangji and Umji combined was 515 people. And that comprised 86 households. So 86 households with a total of 515 15 people, a total of about an average of about 6 people per household. So that's a pretty large unit, you know, and that would include direct nuclear family and people of different generations and also other relatives. In 2011, when we went back, and that's what we're looking at now, the village, remember, it was 515 people before. It was down to 106. 106 people were living in Solgol in 2011, as opposed to 40, what did we say it was, 46 years before? And there were 59 households, which is actually a goodly number. So that comes to a total of a little less than 2 people per household. So what we're looking at is actually a lot of single individual households, older harmony women or men for that matter, who were living all by themselves. Their children had all gone to live in the city, had jobs, and would come to visit them from time to time. But their parents generation, grandparents' generation were staying in the village, living solitary lives often. And so very big difference. In the village, when we were living there in the 1970s, I don't have this screenshot here, but I put together an age pyramid, which shows the composition of the village according to the ages of the people who lived there. And there was a pretty good distribution, as you would expect. It was a pyramid, and it rose up so that the smallest number at the top was the oldest people. But it was a pretty good distribution. In 2011, there was one person who was 16 years old, a high school student, who was living with his mother, who was in her 40s. They were living together. And then the next youngest person in the village out of those 106 people was 53 years old.
Oh,
So there were only 2 people in the village who were under the age of 53. And most of them were well past that, were into their 60s and 70s and 80s.
So who does
So
the farming?
we're looking, what's that?
Who does the farming?
They do.
Their 50s and
They
60s?
continue to do the farming.
Wow.
Some people rent land or don't live in the village, but come in and grow crops on the land. But the villagers themselves do a lot of the work.
Is there a clinic?
A clinic? You mean a health clinic?
Yes.
No. There's one in Quezon. There are a number of doctors. There's a hospital there. There's doctors' offices and clinics, but no, not in the village. What was I going to say? In the time that we lived in the village, 4 of the men who lived in the village were elementary school teachers, and they were among the best, the wellest off, the most prosperous of the villagers. They had all had a higher education. In order to be able to qualify to be school teachers, they would have to do that. So they came from relatively well-to-do families to begin with. And there were, I believe there were 6 elementary schools within the general vicinity of our village in the Myeon area. So there were a lot of kids. There were a lot of kids in the village. You saw their pictures, running around at various ages, going to school. At this time, there was 1 elementary school that served that entire area that 40 years ago had been served by 6 elementary schools. And we learned that not in this area so much, but there were parts of the country where the children in the elementary schools, the majority of the children in the elementary schools, of the students, came from families in which the mother was not a native speaker of Korean. Can you imagine? The mother of most of the children in the school was not a native speaker of Korean. She spoke Vietnamese or Tagalog or Chinese, but not Korean. And so Korean was a second language. Remarkable. And you can guess from this, this has enormous implications for the future of Korea, this homogeneous society, this monocultural society. Everybody shares this common history and common culture. And here you have, and of course it's happening in Seoul as well. It's not only the country folk, the countrymen who can't afford to attract a bride, a young Korean woman who's willing to marry them. It's also the people in the cities. Most people live in the cities nowadays, as you know, and they also, if they don't have a good education and don't have a good job, don't have can't provide a good middle class lifestyle for a prospective bride, they're not interested. They don't want to marry them. And a lot of young women these days don't even want to get married at all. I mean, it's quite remarkable. They don't want to have families. They don't want to have children. And
One
the
can understand that.
public opinion polls, the polls that are taken by Gallup and others, they ask young people, do you want to get married? Do you want to have children? Many of them, large percentages of them say, no, I do not. I want to be independent. I want to have a job. I want to stand on my own 2 feet and live the life I want to live. And I don't want to be tied down to my husband or to my wife for that matter, although this is more a response that you would hear from young women.
Charlie,
So
that's
it's
true.
quite a remarkable change in Korean society and Korean values.
Yeah,
Charlie,
the second part's really true, but about your earlier point about the increasing heterogeneity of Korea, the word for multicultural still has a kind of negative. They use it a lot on TV and so forth, but it has a kind of negative connotation.
It's true. It's true. But Korea, the government, and I think you have to hand it to the Korean government and to the city of Seoul in particular. I'm very impressed by the organizations and the institutions that they've set up specifically to help these young women who are marrying who are kind of purchased brides from Vietnam and the Philippines and other countries. They set up schools for them to learn Korean, to learn about Korean culture, to give them counseling, to help them in all sorts of ways. And they really are trying to integrate these people into Korean life to make it easier for them. And they talk about a multicultural society. Another important thing to know is that Korea has the lowest birth rate in the entire world, lower than Japan, the lowest birth rate in the entire world. And what that means is that Koreans are not reproducing themselves. And the only way that they're going to have the population that they need to take care of this very much, this growing older society, it has a very high proportion of people who are like us, in their 60s and 70s and older, much higher than most other countries. And in order to support those people, you have to have people who are working, who are productive citizens. And in order to get productive citizens, if you don't have a birth rate that's replicating, that's reproducing, you're not going to have them. They're not being born. So where are you going to get them from? They have to come from the outside. They have to come from the outside. And that's what's happening. I don't know what the percentage is of foreign-born people now living in Korea, but I think it's getting up towards 10%. Maybe somebody else knows the answer to that question, but it's getting more and more.
I'm not sure of the answer. to
So
that
these are
question.
very, very big things that are happening. I'm sorry?
There are a lot of factory workers who are immigrants in the, Asan and.
Yes, there are. Yes, there
Yeah.
are.
And I
Yes.
think there are agricultural laborers also, itinerant
Yes.
agricultural laborers. who are
Yes. And people working in all kinds of menial jobs, delivery boys, working in restaurants, selling on the street, a lot of street vendors, hawkers, people working in jobs that don't require a lot of education.
Charlie, officially, it's only 3.4%.
Is that all?
That's what Wikipedia says.
Okay, well, I'm surprised it's so low. That's still much higher than it was before, but I thought I had seen something much higher than that. Okay,
Well,
I
of
stand
course,
corrected.
illegal, undocumented workers and so forth may be really undercounted.
undercounted for sure.
That there's
Charlie,
yeah.
a couple of things. Back when we were in Boston, 2-3 years ago, one of the presentations at Harvard was a woman who was talking about this population change. And
That was a man, a sociologist from Harvard, who was talking about this.
so anyhow, if I remember correctly, he said that if you take the numbers ad absurdum, you would have to say that in some year, not all that far away, there would be no Koreans since the number was dropping. And it was kind of a shock.
Because of the birth rate. And yeah. I'm surprised that the percentage is so low, as Frank is telling us, because certainly there are, as I was about to say, in Seoul, you can go to certain neighborhoods where there's Muslim neighborhoods, there are mosques, there's not Kazakh, Kyrgyzstan, not Kyrgyzstani,
Kazakhstan.
one of the stands. There's a neighborhood where there's just one shop after another that is from one of the Russian-speaking, the old Soviet republics, and then there are there are these neighborhoods that you never would have seen before, and of course restaurants from all of these different cultures that you never saw before.
Charlie,
you can have any kind of food you want. Yes.
9.9% of marriages are international.
All right. Well, that tells you a lot. Okay. So so we are at the 10% mark there. And if that trend continues, then that number of 3% is going to, particularly given the birth rate among native Koreans, that number is going to get higher and higher.
Right.
Before too long.
Charlie, a couple of other questions, observations. One is that on the pictures you showed us for the recent situation, the mountains are beautifully covered with vegetation.
Lush.
Yes.
To the red dirt that we could see on the.
That's true. That's right. Yes, they are. There's been the reforestation of Korea has been a big priority of the government since the 1960s, actually.
Yes.
And it has proceeded apace, and they've done a wonderful job of covering the mountains with forests.
And then the other thing is that you kind of skipped over it. You indicated that there were, I guess, modern bathrooms in the houses that you were showing us in the villages. Is that true? They're flush toilets and all
Yes.
that?
It is true.
Yes,
And
it is true.
And so are they doing?
It's not necessarily true in every house. Not every house has running water, but certainly the more modern ones that I showed you do.
Uh-huh. And I'm always interested in where it goes. Are there Is it septic tanks or is it,
I guess it's septic tanks. I can't answer that. I didn't ask about that, and I didn't go exploring for myself.
I mean, as an anthropologist, you should know.
I
this.
know, I really should have done that. I plead guilty to being lazy. I thought under the circumstances, I really wanted to, of course, as you might expect. But I thought it would be rude to my host to take a flashlight and
It's-
start poking around his pipes.
It's not good.
So I didn't do
dinner
it.
talk, yeah.
Final picture. Here we all are, looking a bit older. I'm not sure any the wiser. And this again is Ketong. Unfortunately, she has left us a few years ago. This is her son, one of her sons, who treated us to a lovely dinner. And there you have it.
Wow,
Okay, very
Thank you,
good.
Shirley.
that's
was
great.
Great, Charlie.
Yeah. Really good.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you.
So Frank has recorded this, at least so he tells me. And this will be available to anybody who's not here